The morning sunlight filtered through my kitchen window as I clutched the phone to my ear, struggling to comprehend what my daughter had just told me. "You can't come to the christening, Mother," Rebecca said, her voice cold. "Your presence would ruin the photos." The words hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the counter to steady myself. "Ruin the photos?" I whispered. "Rebecca, this is my great-grandson's christening, and I want it to be perfect," she replied with an exasperated sigh. "Everyone will be dressed impeccably. The Williamsons will be there. You know how important appearances are." What she meant was that I didn't fit her aesthetic.
Comment where you're watching from. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching.
At 68, I wasn't the sleek, polished woman my daughter had become. My hands were gnarled from arthritis, my face lined with age. In Rebecca's world of curated social media posts and country club memberships, I was an embarrassment. "I'm Trevor's great-grandmother," I said, finding my strength. "I have every right to be there." "Mother," Rebecca's tone sharpened. "The decision is final. We'll send you pictures afterward." The line went dead. I stood there, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the silence. Outside, cardinals flitted around the bird feeder. Life continued as normal, even as my world crumbled. I lowered myself into a chair, legs suddenly weak. The blue dress I'd bought for the occasion hung on my bedroom door, tags still attached. I'd spent weeks searching for something appropriate, wanting to look my best for Trevor's special day. My mind drifted to Rebecca's own christening 45 years ago. How proud my late husband James and I had been. His mother had been there too, despite her advanced age. It never would have occurred to us to exclude her for ruining photos. The memories flooded back, nights staying up with Rebecca when she was sick, struggling to make tuition payments after James died when she was 14, working 2 jobs so she could have dance lessons in private school. The endless sacrifices. For what? To be discarded when I was no longer useful or visually appealing? I wiped away tears. This wasn't the first time Rebecca had made me feel less than. Over the years, as she climbed the social ladder, the distance between us had grown. At first, it was subtle, fewer calls, shortened visits, a frown when I mentioned something that might embarrass her. But this was different. This was a public rejection, a statement that I wasn't worthy of being seen with her perfect family. I made a cup of tea, my mother's remedy for all troubles. As I waited for the kettle, I glanced at the refrigerator door covered with photographs. Rebecca as a toddler, Rebecca at graduation, Rebecca on her wedding day, and there, in the corner, a sonogram picture of Trevor. I'd never even been allowed to hold him. Rebecca always had an excuse. He was sleeping, he was fussy, they couldn't stay long. The kettle whistled. As I poured the water, I noticed my hands shaking, not from sadness, but from anger. How dare she? After everything I had given, everything I had sacrificed. The unfairness burned in my chest. I carried my tea to the living room and sank into my old armchair, the one James used to sit in. It still held the impression of his body after all these years. "What would you do, James?" I whispered to the empty room. "Our daughter has become someone I don't recognize." The afternoon crept by. I tried to distract myself with a novel, but the words blurred. My mind kept returning to the christening, scheduled for Sunday. I'd already purchased a silver rattle as a gift, engraved with Trevor's initials. It sat wrapped in blue paper, a reminder of what I would miss. Around 5, the doorbell rang. Standing on my porch was Martha, my neighbor and closest friend. "You missed our walking group," she said, concerned. "I tried calling, but you didn't pick up." I hadn't even heard the phone. "I'm sorry," I said, letting her in. "It's been a difficult day." Martha took one look at my face and opened her arms. I fell into her embrace, tears returning. "Rebecca," I managed between sobs. "She doesn't want me at Trevor's christening. Says I'll ruin the photos." Martha stiffened with indignation. "She said what?" She led me to the couch. "That's ridiculous. She's always been image conscious," I said, reaching for a tissue. "But this feels like the final straw." Martha shook her head. "That girl has forgotten where she came from. You worked yourself to the bone for her. How many nights did you go without dinner so she could have new dance shoes?" I shrugged, not wanting to count the sacrifices. They never seemed like sacrifices then, just what a mother does. "What are you going to do?" Martha asked. I blew my nose. "What can I do? I can't force my way in. I can't make her want me there." "No," Martha agreed. "But you can stand up for yourself." I looked at her, uncertain. Standing up for myself had never been my strong suit, especially with Rebecca. It was easier to give in, to keep the peace. "Think about it," Martha said, patting my hand. "You deserve better than this, Eleanor." After Martha left, I sat in the darkness, thinking about what she'd said. I knew she was right. I deserved respect, especially from my own daughter. But the thought of confrontation made my stomach churn. I was still sitting there when the phone rang again. I considered not answering, afraid it might be Rebecca. But habit took over, and I picked up. Mrs. Eleanor Simmons, a formal male voice inquired. Yes, that's me, I replied cautiously. This is Andrew Harrington from Harrington, Myers, and Associates. I'm calling regarding the estate of James Simmons. Would it be possible to schedule a meeting with you tomorrow morning? I frowned, confused. My husband has been dead for nearly 30 years. Yes, I'm aware. However, there are matters related to his estate that require your attention. It's quite urgent. Still bewildered, I agreed to meet him at his office tomorrow. As I hung up, a strange feeling settled over me, not quite hope, but something close. Whatever this lawyer wanted, it would give me something to focus on besides Rebecca's rejection. 3 days later, as I stood at my kitchen window, my phone rang. I answered without checking the caller ID, still distracted by the bombshell the lawyer had dropped on me. Mother. Rebecca's voice was breathless, almost panicked. We need to talk. I steeled myself. About what, Rebecca? I just received a letter from a lawyer, she said in a rush. Something about Dad's estate and a trust fund for Trevor's education. They say you're the trustee. What's going on? My hand tightened around the phone. So the letter had reached her. Mr. Harrington had said it would be delivered today. Yes, I said quietly. Your father set up a trust for his future grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I only just found out about it myself. A long pause. How much money are we talking about? Of course that would be her first question. Not why didn't we know about this? Or what did Dad want it used for? Just how much? Enough, I replied, deliberately vague. Enough to give Trevor an excellent education. You need to come over, Rebecca said, suddenly warm. We need to discuss this as a family. The change in her tone was so calculated that I almost laughed. 3 days ago, I was an embarrassment. Now that she knew I controlled money for her son's child, I was suddenly family again. I'm not sure that's a good idea, I said carefully. After all, I wouldn't want to. What was it you said? Yes, ruin anything. Mother, Rebecca's voice became cajoling. I was upset when I said that. I didn't mean it. Of course we want you at the christening. In fact, we'd be honored if you would be Trevor's godmother. The offer hung between us. A week ago, it would have meant everything. Now, knowing it came with strings attached, it felt hollow. I'll think about it, I said. I have another appointment with Mr. Harrington tomorrow. Perhaps we can talk after that. I could hear her frustration. Fine, she said shortly. Call me when you're done. As I hung up, I felt a strange sense of power I hadn't experienced in decades. For once, Rebecca couldn't steamroll over me. For once, I held something she wanted. The question was, what would I do with this unexpected leverage? The offices of Harrington, Myers, and Associates occupied the top floor of a modest building downtown. I'd dressed carefully for the meeting, choosing a simple navy dress and pearls. James had given me the pearls for our 20th anniversary. They made me feel closer to him somehow. As the receptionist led me to Mr. Harrington's office, I tried to calm my racing thoughts. What could possibly have surfaced after all these years? James had left everything in order: our small house, his life insurance, a modest savings account. I'd never expected anything more. Mr. Harrington stood as I entered, a tall man with silver hair and kind eyes. He gestured to a leather chair across from his desk. Mrs. Simmons, thank you for coming. He pulled a thick file from his drawer. I apologize for the mysterious nature of my call. I'm curious why my husband's estate would need attention after 30 years, I said, settling into the chair. Mr. Harrington nodded. Your husband was a remarkably far-sighted man. He opened the file. Shortly before his death, James established a trust that was to remain sealed until specific conditions were met. What conditions? I asked, leaning forward. The birth of his first great-grandchild. My heart skipped a beat. Trevor. Exactly. Mr. Harrington adjusted his glasses. Mr. Simmons invested in several emerging technology companies back in the 1980s. Very modest investments at the time, but over 30 years. He turned the file toward me, pointing to a figure at the bottom of a statement. I blinked, certain I was misreading. That can't be right, I whispered. I assure you, it is. Mr. Harrington's expression was serious. Your husband's investments have grown considerably. The trust is now worth just over $2 million. The room seemed to tilt slightly. $2 million. I gripped the arms of my chair. Per your husband's instructions, Mr. Harrington continued, you are the sole trustee. The money is designated for the education of his great-grandchildren, but you have complete discretion over how it's distributed. I had no idea, I said, still struggling to process. James never mentioned this. The letter he left explains why. Mr. Harrington handed me a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. He asked that this be given to you when the trust was revealed. My hands trembled as I took the envelope. The handwriting on the front, my name in James's distinctive script, made my chest tighten. I carefully broke the seal and unfolded the single page inside. My dearest Eleanor, if you're reading this, I'm long gone, and our family has welcomed the next generation. I'm sorry for keeping this trust a secret, but I wanted to ensure your security without interference from others who might not have your best interests at heart. I've seen how families can change when money is involved. I've designated you as trustee because I trust your judgment completely. You will know what's right when the time comes. Remember what we always said, education is the greatest gift we can give a child. But education comes in many forms. Use this to help our grandchildren and great-grandchildren become not just successful, but kind and thoughtful people. The kind of people who would never make someone feel small or unwanted. All my love, always. James' tears blurred my vision. Even from beyond the grave, James understood. Somehow, he'd known what might happen, how Rebecca might change. He'd given me not just financial resources, but the power to ensure our family's values survived. Mrs. Simmons? Mr. Harrington's voice pulled me back. Are you all right? I carefully refolded the letter. Yes, just overwhelmed. Understandable. He passed me a tissue. Now, regarding the letter sent to your daughter. I followed the protocol your husband established. She's been informed of the trust's existence and purpose, but not the amount. She's also been informed that you have sole discretion as trustee. That explained Rebecca's panicked call. She knew there was money, but not how much, and she knew I controlled it. What happens next? I asked. That's entirely up to you. Mr. Harrington leaned back. The trust is irrevocable. Your daughter cannot contest your decisions regarding distribution. You could fund your great-grandson's education directly, establish conditions for payments, or even expand the definition of education to include other enrichment opportunities. I nodded slowly, thinking of James's letter. Education comes in many forms. There's another matter, Mr. Harrington added, pulling another document from the file. Along with the trust, your husband purchased a property. It's been held by the trust all these years, maintained but unused. A property? This was getting more surreal by the minute. A small lakeside cottage about an hour from here. According to your husband's notes, it was a place you once visited and loved. My breath caught. The little blue cottage by Silver Lake. James and I had stayed there on our honeymoon. We'd always talked about returning, maybe even buying it someday. But life and responsibilities had gotten in the way. It's been modernized over the years, but kept true to its original character, Mr. Harrington continued. The keys are yours whenever you want them. I sat in stunned silence, trying to absorb everything. James had given me a safety net I never knew existed, a place of my own, and the means to shape our family's future. As I left Mr. Harrington's office, I felt lighter somehow. The pain of Rebecca's rejection was still there, but alongside it was something new, a sense of possibility. Back home, I made tea and sat in my favorite chair, James's letter on my lap. I read it again, hearing his voice in every word. The phone rang several times, Rebecca, according to the caller ID, but I let it go to voicemail. I needed time to think. What would I do with this unexpected power? I could give in to Rebecca's sudden renewed interest in having me at the christening. I could pretend the hurt hadn't happened, accept the role of godmother she now offered, and approve whatever educational expenses came along. Or I could do something different, something that honored James's wishes and taught our family what truly mattered. By evening, I'd made my decision. I picked up the phone and dialed Rebecca's number, already imagining her eager response. Mother, finally, she answered immediately. I've been calling all day. We need to discuss this trust situation. Yes, I said calmly. We do, but not over the phone. I'd like you to meet me at a place that's special to your father and me. Tomorrow afternoon, if you're available. I'm very busy tomorrow, Rebecca began, the irritation clear in her voice. Then she seemed to catch herself. But of course I can make time. Where should I meet you? I smiled to myself. Silver Lake Cottage. I'll text you the address. Silver Lake? I've never heard of that place. No, I said softly. There are many things you haven't heard about your father and me. It's time you learned some of them. After hanging up, I walked to my bedroom and opened the closet. The blue dress for the christening still hung there, tags attached. I fingered the soft fabric thoughtfully, then reached for my suitcase instead. I had a cottage to visit, memories to reclaim, and a lesson to teach my daughter about the true meaning of family. For the first time since Rebecca's cruel phone call, I felt a spark of something that had been missing for far too long: hope. The drive to Silver Lake took just over an hour. I followed Mr. Harrington's directions carefully, turning onto increasingly narrow country roads until I reached the final turn. As the cottage came into view, I felt a tightness in my chest. It looked exactly as I remembered: a small blue structure with white trim nestled among pine trees, the lake shimmering behind it. I parked and sat for a moment, gathering my courage. The keys Mr. Harrington had given me felt heavy in my hand. 30 years since James and I had been here, young and full of dreams. Now I was returning alone, a widow, a mother estranged from her daughter, a great-grandmother who had never held her great-grandson. The front door creaked slightly as I pushed it open. Inside, I was struck by how familiar yet different everything was. The layout was the same: open living area with a stone fireplace, small kitchen to the right, 2 bedrooms down a short hallway, but it had been tastefully updated. New furniture, fresh paint, modern appliances. On the mantel sat a framed photograph that made me gasp. James and me on the dock, laughing, his arm around my waist. Our honeymoon. I picked it up, running my fingers over the glass. I'd forgotten this photo existed. Next to it was an envelope with my name on it, another note from James. I opened it with trembling fingers. Eleanor, I hope seeing our special place brings you joy. The photo is a reminder of who we were and what we believed in, that love and respect are the foundation of family. This cottage is yours now, a place of peace when you need it most. Forever yours, James. The first wiped tears from my eyes. How had he known I might someday need this sanctuary? Had he sensed, even then, how Rebecca might change? Or had he simply wanted to ensure I always had a place that was truly mine? I spent the morning exploring the cottage and grounds. The dock had been rebuilt, but the old rowboat was still there, freshly painted. The garden had been maintained, spring flowers just beginning to bloom. Inside, the kitchen was stocked with basics: coffee, tea, simple staples. James had thought of everything. By noon, I had settled in, unpacked my small suitcase, and made a pot of tea. I sat on the porch swing, watching the gentle waves on the lake, rehearsing what I would say to Rebecca. The hurt was still raw, but here, surrounded by memories of a time when love was simpler, I felt stronger. At precisely 2 o'clock, I heard a car on the gravel driveway. Rebecca's sleek silver sedan pulled up next to my modest Honda. She emerged looking exactly as I expected: designer sunglasses, hair perfectly styled, an expression of barely concealed impatience. "Mother," she called, striding toward me. "What is this place?" I remained seated on the porch swing. "This was where your father and I spent our honeymoon," I replied calmly. "It's where we began our family." She glanced around, clearly unimpressed. "Quaint. Is this what the mysterious meeting is about? A trip down memory lane? Please, join me." I gestured to the chair opposite. "There's tea if you'd like some." Rebecca sighed but settled into the chair. "Mother, I have a lot going on with the christening preparations. Can we get to the point? The trust fund?" I poured her a cup of tea she didn't ask for. "The trust is worth $2 million. Her eyes widened, composure slipping for a moment. "2 million, she whispered, then quickly recovered. "Well, that's wonderful for Trevor's future." "Yes, it is," I agreed. "Your father was very specific about how it should be used, for education." "Of course." Rebecca nodded eagerly. "We've already been looking at the best preschools. There's an exclusive Montessori program that costs." I held up my hand. "I need to be clear about something, Rebecca. You hurt me deeply when you said I couldn't attend Trevor's christening." Her face tightened. "Mother, I told you I was upset that day." "I didn't mean you meant it," I said quietly. "And it wasn't the first time you've made me feel unwelcome or embarrassed you. I've spent years making excuses for your behavior, telling myself it was just your way. But the truth is, it's unkind." Rebecca set down her teacup with a clatter. "So this is what the meeting is really about? Punishing me by threatening Trevor's education?" "Not at all." I met her gaze steadily. "The money will absolutely be used for Trevor's education. But I'm going to be an active part of that process, and his life." "What exactly does that mean?" Her voice had a dangerous edge. "It means I'll be at the christening, not as a godmother, but as his great-grandmother. It means I'll visit regularly, not just when it's convenient for you. It means the money will be disbursed directly to educational institutions, not given to you or Michael to manage." Rebecca stood abruptly. "This is blackmail." "No." I remained seated, keeping my voice level. "This is a grandmother who has finally realized her own worth. I won't be excluded from my family anymore, Rebecca. I won't be treated as an inconvenience. And if I refuse," she challenged, "the trust will still be there for Trevor when he's 18. He can use it for college, or trade school, or whatever education he chooses. But you won't have access to it for preschools or private elementary schools or whatever other expenses you're planning. Rebecca paced the porch, her composure cracking. I can't believe this. Dad would never have wanted you to use his money this way. Actually, I said, reaching for the letter James had left at the lawyer's office. Your father was very clear about his intentions. Would you like to read it? She snatched the letter, eyes darting across the page. Her expression changed as she read, first disbelief, then something like shame. He knew, she whispered. Somehow he knew I would. She didn't finish the thought. Your father was a wise man, I said gently. He understood people, their strengths and weaknesses. He loved you, Rebecca, but he wouldn't have approved of how you've treated me. She handed back the letter, avoiding my eyes. So what happens now? That depends on you. I folded the letter carefully. I won't force my way into your life, but I won't be pushed out either. We can find a middle ground where we treat each other with respect and kindness, where Trevor knows his great-grandmother. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the lake. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost its sharp edge. The christening is Sunday, she said. Your blue dress will be appropriate. It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. I nodded, accepting it for what it was. There's something else, I added. This cottage. It belongs to me now. I plan to spend a lot of time here, especially in the summer. It would be a wonderful place for Trevor to learn to swim, to fish, to enjoy nature. Rebecca looked around, seeing the cottage with new eyes. It is pretty here, she admitted reluctantly. Your father and I were very happy in this place, I said softly. I'd like to create new memories here, with you and Trevor, if you're willing. She didn't answer immediately, and I didn't press. The porch swing creaked gently as a breeze rolled in from the lake. Progress would be slow with Rebecca, I knew. Years of patterns couldn't be changed in a single afternoon. But for the first time in a long time, I felt hope that we might find our way back to being a true family. As Rebecca walked back to her car an hour later, she paused and turned. Sunday at 11, she said, her voice carrying across the yard. Don't be late. I smiled to myself as her car disappeared down the driveway. It wasn't the heartfelt reconciliation I might have dreamed of, but it was a beginning. A door that had been firmly closed was now cracked open, letting in a sliver of light. That evening, I sat on the dock, watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of orange and pink. I thought of James, of the incredible gift he had given me, not just the money or the cottage, but the courage to reclaim my place in our family. Thank you, I whispered to the fading light, for everything. Sunday morning arrived with a sky so blue it hurt to look at it. I stood in front of my mirror, smoothing the fabric of my blue dress. I'd removed the tags 3 days ago, after returning from the cottage. The dress fit well, modest but elegant, with a lace collar that softened the lines of my aging neck. Martha had come over to help me with my hair, insisting on styling it for the special occasion. You look beautiful, she said, stepping back to admire her work. Dignified. I smiled at her reflection in the mirror. Thank you for everything, Martha. I couldn't have found my courage without you. She squeezed my shoulder. All I did was remind you of what you already knew. James would be proud of you today. I touched the pearl necklace at my throat. I think he would. The drive to St. Mark's Episcopal Church was familiar. The same church where Rebecca had been christened, where she'd been married. I arrived 20 minutes early, parking in the spot Rebecca had texted me about. Reserved for family, the small sign read. Family. The word felt different now. As I walked toward the church entrance, I spotted Rebecca's husband Michael standing on the steps, bouncing little Trevor in his arms. Unlike Rebecca, Michael had always been kind to me, if somewhat distant. His face brightened when he saw me. Eleanor, you made it. He came down the steps to greet me. Rebecca was worried you might change your mind. I wouldn't miss it, I said, my eyes drawn to the baby in his arms. Trevor was wide awake, his blue eyes, James's eyes, taking in the world with quiet curiosity. Would you like to hold him? Michael asked, already shifting the baby toward me. He's been fed and changed, so he's in a good mood. My heart raced as I carefully took Trevor in my arms for the first time. He was solid and warm, smelling of baby powder and something indefinably sweet. His tiny hand wrapped around my finger, and I felt a surge of love so powerful it nearly took my breath away. Hello, Trevor, I whispered. I'm your great-grandmother. He studied my face solemnly, then his mouth curved into a toothless smile. I laughed, tears pricking my eyes. He likes you, Michael said, sounding pleased. He doesn't smile for just anyone. We walked into the church together, Trevor still in my arms. The interior was decorated with white flowers and blue ribbons. Family members and friends were already gathering, filling the pews. I saw Rebecca at the front, speaking with the minister. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw me holding Trevor, but she quickly composed herself and walked over. "Mother, you're early," she said, leaning in to kiss my cheek, a gesture so unexpected I nearly pulled back in surprise. "I didn't want to risk being late," I replied, reluctantly transferring Trevor back to his mother's arms. "He's beautiful, Rebecca." Something flickered in her eyes, pride, perhaps, or a hint of the connection we once shared. "Yes, he is. The minister says we should begin soon. Your seat is in the front row, with the immediate family." I nodded, grateful for this small but significant acknowledgement. As I moved toward the front pew, I heard whispers from Rebecca's friends, felt curious glances follow me. I straightened my back and kept walking. Let them wonder. Let them see that I belonged here. The ceremony was beautiful in its simplicity. Trevor, surprisingly calm throughout, accepted the baptismal water with only a small whimper of protest. When the minister spoke of family and community raising this child in faith and love, I felt the words resonate deep within me. I had feared Rebecca might try to minimize my presence, but to my surprise, she mentioned me specifically during the short speech she gave afterward. "We're especially grateful to have 4 generations present today," she said, her voice clear in the hushed church. "From my mother, Eleanor, to our son Carson, to little Trevor. Family is our greatest blessing." The words sounded rehearsed, perhaps even a bit hollow, but the fact that she had included me at all felt like a victory. After the ceremony, we moved to the church hall for a reception. I found myself seated at the head table between Michael's mother and Carson, Rebecca's son. Unlike his mother, Carson had always been affectionate with me, though our visits were infrequent due to his college studies. "Gran," he said, hugging me warmly. "You look amazing. That blue suits you." "Thank you, sweetheart." I patted his hand. "How are your studies going?" "Good. I'm finishing my master's thesis next month." He lowered his voice. "Mom told me about the trust, about how you stood up to her. I'm proud of you." I blinked in surprise. "She told you?" He nodded. "We had a long talk last night. She didn't go into details, but she admitted she'd been difficult." "That's a first." Before I could respond, Rebecca appeared at my other side, holding Trevor. "Mother, would you mind taking him for a moment? I need to check on the caterers." Again, that small, unexpected courtesy. I took Trevor gladly, cradling him against my shoulder. "I'll be right back," Rebecca promised, then hesitated. "You look nice today." The blue was a good choice. As she walked away, I exchanged a glance with Carson, who raised his eyebrows in silent acknowledgement of the change. The afternoon passed in a pleasant blur. I held Trevor whenever given the chance, posed for formal photographs without a single comment about ruining them, and received congratulations from people who had previously barely acknowledged my existence. It wasn't perfect. Rebecca was still stiff, still careful with her words, but the cruel edge was gone, replaced by something approaching respect. As the reception wound down, Rebecca approached me again, this time without Trevor. "We're having a small family dinner next Sunday," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "At our house. We'd like you to come." "I'd like that," I replied simply. She nodded, then added, "Maybe afterwards, you could show us the cottage? Carson's never seen it, and it might be nice for Trevor to nap there sometimes, when you're visiting." The invitation was tentative, still wrapped in the language of obligation rather than genuine warmth. But it was an opening, a small crack in the wall she had built between us. "I'd love that," I said. "The cottage should be shared with family." As I drove home that evening, exhausted but content, I thought about the day's small victories. No grand reconciliation had occurred, no tearful apologies exchanged. Rebecca was still Rebecca, image-conscious, somewhat cold, unlikely to ever fully change. But something fundamental had shifted. I had reclaimed my place in our family, not as an afterthought or an embarrassment, but as Trevor's great-grandmother, as Carson's grandmother, as Rebecca's mother, as Eleanor, a woman with her own power and value. At home, I removed my dress carefully, hanging it in the closet. Unlike the unworn dresses from previous family events, this one would stay. A reminder of the day I stopped accepting less than I deserved. On my bedside table sat a small silver frame containing a new photograph, me holding Trevor at the christening, his tiny hand clutching my finger. Michael had taken it during a quiet moment and slipped it to me before I left. "The first of many," he had whispered. I touched the frame gently, hope blooming in my heart. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. Old wounds don't heal overnight, and Rebecca's pride ran deep. But for the first time in years, I believed we had a chance at becoming a real family again. And it had all started with a rejection that had finally pushed me to stand up for myself. The week following the christening passed in a blur of quiet anticipation. I spent several days at the cottage, cleaning and personalizing the space. I brought photo albums from home, books I loved, even my favorite quilt that James's mother had made for our wedding. The cottage was becoming mine in a way that felt both new and deeply familiar. Martha helped me prepare for Sunday's dinner, insisting we go shopping for a hostess gift. Not flowers, she said as we browsed a home goods store. Something meaningful, something that shows you're part of the family history. We eventually found it, a silver picture frame engraved with family traditions along the bottom edge. I had the perfect photo for it, one I'd discovered in an old album. James holding baby Rebecca on this very lake, her tiny toes just touching the water as she squealed with delight. Sunday evening arrived with soft spring rain pattering against my windows. I dressed carefully in slacks and a sage green blouse that Martha assured me brought out the color of my eyes. The silver frame was wrapped in simple cream paper, the photo already inside. Rebecca's house was exactly what you'd expect, a sprawling colonial in the most exclusive neighborhood, perfectly maintained and tastefully decorated. As I pulled into the circular driveway, I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I was here as Trevor's great-grandmother, as a valued family member with every right to be present. Michael answered the door, Trevor balanced on his hip. "Eleanor, welcome," he said warmly, stepping back to let me in. "We're just having drinks in the living room." I followed him through the marble-floored entryway into a spacious living room where Rebecca and Carson sat with an older couple I recognized as Michael's parents. The room was immaculate, cream sofas, gleaming hardwood floors, tasteful art on the walls. Not a toy or baby item in sight, despite the presence of a 4-month-old. "Mother, you're right on time," Rebecca said, rising to greet me. The same cool politeness as at the christening, but without the edge of hostility that had been present for so many years. "Thank you for inviting me," I replied, handing her the wrapped frame. "Just a small gift." Rebecca looked surprised but took the package. "You didn't need to bring anything." I wanted to. After brief greetings with everyone, Michael offered me a glass of wine and handed Trevor to me without my having to ask. Progress, small but significant. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, a perfectly cooked roast, vegetables arranged with artistic precision, wines paired appropriately. The conversation remained pleasant if somewhat superficial: Carson's studies, Michael's recent business trip, local gossip about neighbors I didn't know. Rebecca was playing the perfect hostess, but I noticed how rarely she actually looked at me directly. The old pattern was still there, inclusion without true connection. After dessert, as coffee was being served, I decided to break the pattern. "Tell me," I said, looking directly at Rebecca, "how are you adjusting to motherhood? Carson's wife being away so much with her new job?" The table went quiet. Rebecca blinked, clearly caught off guard by the personal question. It's fine," she said stiffly. "Busy, of course. It must be difficult," I pressed gently. "When I was raising you after your father died, I found it overwhelming at times, even with just one child. I can't imagine doing it while maintaining all your other responsibilities." Michael's mother nodded sympathetically. "That's true. Rebecca barely sleeps these days, between the charity foundation and helping with Trevor." Rebecca shot her mother-in-law a look that could freeze water. "I manage," she said curtly. "Of course you do," I agreed. "You've always been competent at everything you attempt. But it's all right to find it challenging. It doesn't make you less of a mother or grandmother to admit that." The room fell silent again. Rebecca stared at her coffee cup, and I wondered if I'd pushed too far. Then, to my surprise, she sighed. "It is harder than I expected," she admitted quietly, "especially with Carson and Abby living so close but both working such demanding hours. I want to support their careers, but sometimes you just want your son to be more present." I finished for her. "I understand. I felt the same way when you were building your career." Something flickered in Rebecca's eyes, a recognition, perhaps. "Did you? You never said anything. Would it have made a difference?" I asked, not unkindly. She didn't answer, but the look on her face told me she was actually considering the question. Carson cleared his throat. "Speaking of being present, Mom mentioned you might show us the lake cottage tonight. Is that still possible?" The moment of connection passed, but it had been real. I nodded to Carson, grateful for his sensitivity. "I'd love to. It's not far." An hour later, our small group stood in the cottage living room. The rain had stopped, and the setting sun cast a golden glow through the windows. Trevor was asleep in his carrier, undisturbed by the short drive. "This is where Dad proposed to you?" Carson asked, examining the honeymoon photo on the mantel. "No. That was at the Italian restaurant downtown, long gone now. But this is where we spent our first week as husband and wife." I smiled at the memory. "Your grandfather was a terrible fisherman. He fell in the lake twice trying to cast his line." Carson laughed. Michael wandered to the windows, admiring the view of the lake. His parents exclaimed over the stone fireplace, sharing stories of their own early marriage. Rebecca stood slightly apart, her eyes drawn to the family photos I'd arranged on the bookshelf. She picked up one of herself at about 5 years old, sitting on James's shoulders. "I remember this day," she said softly. "Dad took me fishing. I caught a tiny sunfish and was so proud. You insisted we cook it for dinner," I replied, moving to stand beside her. "Your father pretended to eat it, but he actually had a sandwich after you went to bed." A small smile played at her lips. "He was always doing things like that, making me feel important." "He adored you," I said simply. Rebecca replaced the photo carefully. "I miss him sometimes, even after all these years." "So do I." I touched her arm lightly. "He would have loved Trevor." She nodded, blinking rapidly. For a moment, I thought she might say more, might finally open up about whatever had caused her to build such walls between us. But the moment passed. "The place is charming," she said, her voice returning to its usual controlled tone. "Trevor will enjoy summers here when he's older." It wasn't the emotional breakthrough I might have hoped for, but the mere fact that she was imagining future family gatherings at the cottage was significant. As they prepared to leave, Trevor woke fussing. Rebecca changed him efficiently while I made a bottle from the supplies they'd brought. "Would you like to feed him before you go?" I offered, holding out the bottle. "Actually," Rebecca said, hesitating, "why don't you feed him? He seems calm with you." I settled into the porch swing with Trevor, his warm weight perfect in my arms. Through the window, I could see Rebecca watching us, her expression unreadable. Later, after everyone had gone and the cottage was quiet again, I sat on the porch watching the moonlight on the lake. The evening had been a mixed success, moments of real connection interspersed with Rebecca's ingrained formality. But something was changing, slowly but surely. The cold rejection I'd faced just weeks ago had evolved into cautious inclusion. Rebecca might never be the warm, demonstrative daughter I'd once hoped for, but perhaps we could build something new, a relationship based on mutual respect and shared love for Trevor. As I looked out at the silver path the moon cast across the water, I felt James's presence strongly. "We're getting there," I whispered to the night air. "Slowly, but we're getting there." Summer arrived with warmth and sunshine. I spent most days at the cottage, gardening, reading, and watching the lake. The solitude suited me, but I wasn't alone as often anymore. Carson and Abby visited frequently, sometimes staying overnight. Carson loved fishing from the old rowboat, while Abby painted watercolors from the dock. Michael came occasionally with Trevor. I cherished watching my great-grandson discover grass between his toes, marvel at minnows in the shallows, and delight at loons calling across the water. Rebecca rarely came, but when she did, she was cordial. Our conversations remained superficial, but without the tension that had defined our relationship for decades. On a golden afternoon in July, I heard tires on the gravel driveway. Rebecca's car pulled up, with her alone inside, unusual, as she rarely came without Michael or Trevor. "Rebecca," I said, rising from my gardening. "I wasn't expecting you." "I was in the area," she replied unconvincingly. "Do you have a moment?" "Of course." I gestured toward the porch. "Would you like some iced tea?" She followed me inside, glancing around at the changes I'd made: new curtains, rearranged furniture, more family photos. "The place looks nice," she said as I handed her a glass. "You've made it your own." We settled on the porch swing, the gentle creaking the only sound for several minutes. Rebecca seemed uncharacteristically nervous. "I've been thinking about us," she finally said, "about how things have been between us." I remained silent, giving her space. "Carson asked why I've always been so hard on you, why I've kept you at a distance." She sipped her tea. I didn't have a good answer. "What did you tell him?" I asked softly. "That after Dad died, I felt abandoned. Not physically, you were always there, but emotionally. You were so strong, never crying in front of me, never showing weakness. I thought you didn't really miss him, that you didn't need anyone, including me." I felt my chest tighten. "Oh, Rebecca, I cried every night after you went to bed. I was terrified of breaking down in front of you. I thought I needed to be strong for your sake. I realize that now," she said quietly. "But as a teenager, I felt angry, like you were this perfect widow, this perfect mother, and I could never measure up. So I stopped trying to connect. I built my own life where I could control everything. All these years, my attempts to protect her had pushed her away. When Trevor was born," Rebecca continued, "I started having dreams about Dad, about what he would think of me now, of how I've treated you." She looked down. "I don't think he would be proud of me." "He would be proud of many things," I said gently. "Your success, your intelligence, your son, your grandson. He might not have approved of everything, but he would have loved you regardless. That's what parents do. Even when their children exclude them from family events? Even when they say cruel things about ruining photos? Even then, I answered simply. She watched butterflies dance above my flower bed before speaking again. I've never been good at apologies, she finally said, but I am sorry, Mother, for all of it. The words I never expected to hear hung between us. Not a full reconciliation, but a beginning. Thank you, I said. That means a great deal to me. Rebecca reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. This is why I came today. Carson and Abby asked me to deliver this. Inside was a card with a sonogram image. Coming January 2023. Another great-grandchild to love. Abby's pregnant? Joy bubbled up inside me. 12 weeks, Rebecca confirmed with a small smile. They wanted you to be among the first to know. I traced the fuzzy outline of the tiny being. This is wonderful news. There's something else, Rebecca said. We're all hoping you might consider having Christmas at the cottage this year. It would be Trevor's first real Christmas, and with the new baby coming, it seems right to start some new family traditions. You want to have Christmas here, all of you? She nodded. If you're willing. It might be chaotic with Trevor, but I would love nothing more, I interrupted. This place was meant for family gatherings. As she rose to leave, she paused at the door. The trust fund, I'm glad Dad set it up the way he did. Not just for Trevor's sake, but because it brought you back into our lives. Into my life. After she left, I sat on the dock, the sonogram picture in my hand. I thought about the journey of the past months, from rejection to reconciliation. Not perfect, but real. I remembered James's words, "You will know what's right when the time comes." He had given me more than money and property. He had given me the chance to reclaim my place in our family. To be valued, not just tolerated. The sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I smiled, imagining the cottage filled with family at Christmas, Carson and Abby, Rebecca and Michael, Trevor toddling around a twinkling tree, and a new baby on the way. Full circle. From rejection to belonging. From exclusion to the heart of the family. Not perfect, but perfectly mine.